What if I told you that one of the most influential figures in Christian history had a past filled with controversy, power struggles, and even persecution? John Calvin is often seen as a great reformer, but behind his theological legacy lies a darker side that many prefer to ignore. In this video, we're uncovering 5 shocking facts about Calvin's past, facts that will challenge what you think you know about him. From his involvement in brutal executions to his iron-fisted control over Geneva, this isn't the Calvin they teach in textbooks. By the end of this video, you'll have a deeper, more complete understanding of the man behind Calvinism. Whether you admire him or question his legacy, these revelations will change how you see history, and maybe even how you see faith itself. Let's dive in. Execution of heretics. John Calvin, one of the central figures of the Protestant Reformation, advocated for the severe punishment of individuals deemed heretical. One of the most notorious cases was that of Michael Servetus, a Spanish theologian and physician who denied the doctrine of the Trinity and infant baptism. These beliefs were seen as a threat to the Orthodox Christianity of the time, leading Servetus to be persecuted by both Catholics and Protestants. Servetus fled to Geneva, where he was recognized and arrested under Calvin's orders. During his trial, he was convicted of heresy and sentenced to death. Although Calvin requested a less cruel form of execution, such as beheading, the city council decided on execution by burning at the stake. On October 27, 1553, Servetus was burned alive, an event that marked the religious intolerance of the period. Theocratic governance in Geneva. During his rule in Geneva, Calvin established a theocratic regime in which the Church exercised great control over daily life. The city became a center of the Protestant Reformation, but also a place where strict rules were enforced in the name of Christian morality. The consistory, a type of religious court led by Calvin, supervised citizens' behavior and imposed punishments for moral infractions. Geneva's authorities banned practices considered immoral, such as gambling, dancing, and even certain styles of clothing. Punishments ranged from warnings and fines to exile and executions. The rigid theocratic rule of Calvin led Geneva to be compared to a religious dictatorship, where dissent was harshly suppressed. Although Calvin is widely recognized for his theological contributions, his governance in Geneva illustrates the tension between faith and power. His desire to create a disciplined society faithful to the scriptures led to the persecution of opponents and the use of force to maintain order, reflecting the challenges and contradictions of the Protestant Reformation. Intolerance towards dissenters. John Calvin demonstrated little tolerance for those who held theological views that diverged from his own. He firmly believed that doctrinal purity was essential for maintaining both religious integrity and societal stability. As a result, he justified the persecution of those who opposed his teachings, considering their views dangerous not only to the Church but also to the moral fabric of the community. His stance led to the suppression of various religious movements and the severe punishment of individuals deemed heretical. One of the most infamous examples of Calvin's intolerance was the execution of Michael Servetus, a Spanish physician and theologian who rejected the doctrine of the Trinity. Despite being warned not to enter Geneva, Servetus was arrested, tried for heresy, and ultimately burned at the stake in 1553. Although Calvin did not directly order the execution, he fully supported the decision, reinforcing his belief that heresy warranted the harshest consequences. This event remains a significant historical example of the dangers of religious intolerance in the pursuit of doctrinal conformity. Harsh treatment of critics. Calvin was known for his severe and often aggressive responses to those who criticized him or his teachings. He did not hesitate to use sharp, derogatory language to demean his opponents, frequently engaging in heated theological disputes. His writings are filled with scathing rebukes directed at those he viewed as enemies of the faith, portraying them as ignorant, deceitful, or morally corrupt. This combative style was not merely rhetorical, it reflected his broader approach to governance in Geneva, where dissenters faced strict discipline and, in some cases, exile or imprisonment. Calvin's rigid enforcement of his theological principles extended beyond his immediate opponents to include fellow reformers with whom he disagreed. For instance, he had a contentious relationship with Sebastian Castellio, a scholar who advocated for greater tolerance in matters of faith. Castellio challenged Calvin's authority, arguing that religious persecution contradicted the fundamental principles of Christianity. In response, Calvin and his supporters vilified Castellio, effectively pushing him out of Geneva and undermining his credibility. While Calvin's contributions to Protestant theology were profound, his legacy is also marked by his authoritarian approach to religious leadership. His unwavering commitment to enforcing doctrinal purity shaped the development of Reformed Christianity but also highlighted the dangers of suppressing dissent in the name of faith. Justification of capital punishment for blasphemy. John Calvin firmly upheld the belief that blasphemy and heresy were grave offenses that warranted capital punishment. Drawing from biblical texts, particularly Leviticus 24 verse 16, which states that anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord must be put to death, Calvin saw such penalties as a divine mandate rather than mere human legislation. For him, the sanctity of God's law required strict enforcement, and civil authorities were responsible for ensuring that divine justice was carried out on earth. Calvin's justification for capital punishment in cases of blasphemy was deeply rooted in his understanding of the relationship between church and state. He believed that governing authorities were not only responsible for maintaining civil order but also for upholding religious purity. In his view, tolerating blasphemy or heresy would not only corrupt the faith but also invite divine judgment upon society as a whole. This conviction led him to advocate for the execution of individuals who openly defied the core tenets of Christianity. A key example of Calvin's stance was the case of Michael Servetus, a Spanish physician and theologian accused of heresy for rejecting the doctrine of the Trinity. Despite warnings, Servetus traveled to Geneva, where he was arrested and condemned to death. Although some of his contemporaries debated the severity of the punishment, Calvin defended the decision, seeing it as a necessary act to safeguard true Christian doctrine. For him, executing a heretic was not an act of personal vengeance but a solemn duty to protect the faith from corruption. Calvin's interpretation of biblical law was also influenced by his broader theological framework, which emphasized the sovereignty of God and the authority of Scripture. He saw the enforcement of divine law as an expression of God's will, believing that deviations from orthodoxy posed a threat to both the church and society. While modern perspectives largely reject such harsh measures, Calvin's views reflected the broader religious and political climate of the 16th century, where unity in faith was considered essential for stability. Despite the controversial nature of his stance, Calvin's justification of capital punishment for blasphemy highlights the historical tension between religious authority and individual freedom. His legacy remains a subject of debate, with some viewing him as a defender of doctrinal purity and others as a symbol of religious intolerance. Regardless of perspective, his influence on the intersection of theology and law remains a significant chapter in the history of the Reformation. And so, we conclude our journey through the fascinating world of biblical prophecies and Israel's crucial role in the end times. The history of Israel, its divine promise, and the fulfillment of these prophecies are clear signs that the times are drawing near. May we remain watchful, firm in faith, and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. If this content has helped you understand the prophetic events and the meaning of the second coming of Christ, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming videos. See you next time.